Malloy froze when the scream came through the vent under his desk. It was sharp, human, and cut off fast. The room went still after it faded. He stood, grabbed his radio, and pressed the button.
Control. This is Lieutenant Malloy. I've got something coming from sub-level C. Confirm activity.
Static filled the speaker. There was no voice, so he tried again, only to be met with more static. And a faint hiss. He clipped the radio to his vest and stepped into the hallway. The lights hummed overhead. The air smelled like cold metal and stale coffee. His boots thumped the floor in steady beats as he walked. Another scream rose from below, shorter this time, and muffled. He reached the elevator and input the call button briskly. The doors opened, but the panel for sub-level C didn't respond. He pressed it again. Nothing.
Control. I need access to sub-level C.
He said into the radio. Silence. He exhaled in frustration and left the elevator, heading for the service stairs. The metal railing felt cold under his hand. The air sharpened as he descended, giving the back of his throat a taste of disinfectant. At the bottom, the door to sub-level C stood slightly open. That door was never open. A red light blinked above the frame, the lock panel flickered, and Malloy pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The hallway was colder than the floors above. The lights buzzed in a low, steady line. A chemical smell thralled through the air next, bitter with a burnt plastic edge. His breath fogged in front of him as he moved forward. A strobe light flickered at the far end, slow and uneven. Each flash lit a small section while the rest stayed dark. A scrape came from the shadows, something dragging across tile. Malloy stopped, his hand near his radio.
Control. I've got movement down here.
Static answered him. He took another step. The strobe flashed. A shape stood at the far end, human-sized, its shoulders hunched, head tilted and arms hanging low. Then the light cut out, swelling the surroundings in darkness. Another flash. The shape was closer now, its feet pointed inward, its knees bent in a way that looked wrong but still human. Its breathing came fast and sharp. It became dark again. Malloy stepped back. The next flash hit. The shape charged. Its feet slapped the floor in rapid beats. Its arms jerked with each step. Its mouth hung open. Its eyes didn't blink. A chain around its waist snapped tight, yanking it sideways. It slammed against the wall and dropped to its knees. The chain rattled as it strained forward. Arms pulled tight behind its back. Head jerking once as a low sound came from its throat. The strobe flickered again. Its skin twitched under the light. Its shoulders rose and fell in fast, uneven breaths. Its fingers curled against the restraints. Malloy held his ground, his breath fast, the chain scraping the floor as the figure pulled again. A door behind him opened.
Lieutenant.
Malloy turned. Captain Haldren stood at the end of the hall with two MPs flanking him. Their rifles hung low. Their eyes stayed on Malloy.
You weren't supposed to see this.
Haldren warned. Malloy kept his hands visible. He told Haldren that people were screaming down here. Haldren walked closer, boots clicking softly on the tile.
You'll sign a non-disclosure and forget what you saw.
Malloy refused. Haldren sighed.
Then we use you for something else.
The MPs moved in. Malloy reached for his radio, but one grabbed his wrist and slammed it against the wall while the other pinned his shoulder. Pain shot up his arm. He tried to twist free, but the grip tightened. "He's resisting," one MP said.
He won't for long.
Haldren answered. A needle pressed into Malloy's neck. Cold spread under his skin. His vision blurred. The hallway tilted. The light smeared into long white streaks. The strobe flashed once more, and the chained creature was standing again. Then everything went dark. Malloy woke up to a sharp chemical smell. His eyes opened slow. A bright light flashed above him in short bursts, each strobe lighting the room for a second before dropping it back into a dim shadow. He tried to move, but the straps held his wrists, ankles, and chest against a cold table. His breathing was frantic and fueled by adrenaline. The strobe flashed again. Several figures stood around him. They had lab coats, masks, and gloves. One adjusted a machine beside the table. Another checked a monitor. A third held a clipboard close to their chest. Malloy pulled against the straps. The leather dug into his skin. The closest doctor stepped back and said he was awake. The next flash showed tall metal frames, tubes running into dark bags, hanging overhead. Some bags glistened under the light. Others gave off a faint glow that pulsed in slow beats. Then the light cut out. Malloy's breathing quickened. The straps creaked under the tension. The strobe flashed, providing light again. A doctor leaned over him, their gloves trembling as they reached for the dial near his head. A faint hum rose from the machine. The glowing bag brightened for a second until the light cut out again. Malloy felt something cold move through the tube near his arm. A slow push, a pressure under his skin. He tried to twist away, but the strap across his chest held him down. The next flash showed the doctor stepping back, whispering to each other. The glistening bag swayed slightly from the movement in the room. Malloy swallowed and asked where he was, but no one answered. The strobe cut out, muffling his world into darkness again. A soft beep came from the machine near his shoulder. Another beep followed, faster. The cold sensation in his arm spread toward his elbow. His fingers twitched against the restraints. With another flash of the strobe, he could see a doctor lean close, their mask brushing his cheek. Their breath smelled like coffee and something bitter. "Hold still." A hand pressed against his jaw, checking his skin with quick clinical movements before pulling away. The next flash showed the glowing bag brightening again, the fluid inside shifting as a faint vibration passed through the tube. The machine hummed louder. The doctors watched the monitor. None of them looked at Malloy. As darkness fell again, Malloy felt the cold reach his shoulder. A heavy pulse moved under his ribs. His breath caught in his throat. He tried to speak, but his voice came out rough.
"What are you doing to me?"
The strobe flashed. The closest doctor stepped back, eyes widening for a moment before looking away. Another typed into a tablet. The machine beeped again, faster. Malloy's fingers twitched harder. His jaw pulled once in a sharp, involuntary movement. The strap across his chest creaked. As the strobe flashed again, his forearm shifted under his skin. There was a ripple, a tightening. Muscles were pulling in directions they never had before. The doctor stepped back. One shouted that he was destabilizing. Another yelled to get back. Malloy tried to speak, but only a rough sound came out. His throat felt thick. His tongue felt heavy. Heat spread across his face. His vision doubled for a moment, then snapped back. Pressure climbed behind his eyes. His jaw pulled forward. His teeth pressed together, and he was tasting metal. The skin around his mouth tightened as something pushed forward beneath it. There was a twitch, a pull, and a new weight forming. A clipboard clattered on the floor. Someone screamed the word they'd been using behind closed doors.
"The freak!"
Malloy's chest tightened, and his ribs felt like they were being pushed outward from the inside. His breath caught hard. His shoulders jerked, and his spine pulled in a sharp, involuntary motion. Heat shot down his arms. His fingers spread wide, nails scraping the table. The machine spiked, and the alarm screamed. A doctor shouted to shut it down. Another yelled that it wouldn't shut down, that it was overriding. Malloy's back lifted off the table as the strap across his chest strained. The leather was barely holding. His shoulder blades pressed hard against the surface as something heavy pushed outward from his upper back. The pressure stopped his breath for a second. The lights flickered again, and two shapes rose beneath his skin, long and hard, pressing upward. The doctor stumbled back. One hit the wall. Another grabbed a counter to steady themselves. Malloy gasped. The air tasted like chemicals and heat. His vision blurred again. His arm shook violently, and the pressure in his back surged. The table vibrated under him. The metal brackets that contained him groaned. Someone shouted that the restraints were failing. His throat tightened, and a sound came out. Something caught between a scream and a word. Tentacle-like growths pushed forward from his face, slow at first, then faster, twitching in the air as the doctors backed away until they hit the far wall. Malloy's back arched again. The pressure behind his shoulders surged. The two shapes beneath his skin pushed upward. His breath stopped for a moment, and his vision went white. The strap across his chest snapped. The sound echoed through the room. Malloy's body jerked upward. His spine pulled into a new shape. His shoulders widened. The two shapes on his back rose higher. They were now long appendages, heavy, twitching once before fully lifting. The doctors ran for the door. Malloy sat up on the table as the remaining restraints tore free. His new limbs hit the air with a heavy thud. The tentacle-like growths around his mouth twitched in fast, uneven movements. His breath came out hot and loud. Malloy was still inside this monstrosity, fully conscious, fully aware, but fully transformed. He stepped off the table. The floor shook under the weight of his new limbs. The doctors near the door shouted for everyone to move. Malloy turned toward the sound. His vision sharpened. Every detail in the room hit him at once. The hum of the lights, the chemical smell, the heat from the machines, the cold air rushing through the vents. His senses felt too strong, too sharp. A machine behind him beeped in a fast, panicked rhythm. One of his back limbs swung without warning and hit the machine hard. The metal bent, and sparks jumped. The machine toppled and crashed against the floor. A doctor screamed and stumbled backward. Another machine hummed louder. His back limbs twitched again and hit the second machine, sending a sharp vibration through the floor. Panels fell from the ceiling. A tray of tools clattered across the ground.
Get away from him!
Someone yelled. Malloy turned toward the voice. His tentacles twitched, and heat rose through his chest. His vision locked onto a nurse near the far wall. Her eyes widened, and she froze. Malloy stared at her. Something inside him had shifted. A pressure behind his eyes, a pulse in his skull. The air around him felt thick and submersive. His tentacles snapped forward in a fast, sharp movement. The nurse gasped. Her hands flew to her arms. Her breath caught hard as she slapped at her sleeves, her eyes darting across her skin.
No, get them off, get them off!
Her voice cracked. She clawed at her collar and shook her head hard enough to make her hair whip across her face.
They're on me! Oh God! Spiders!
She stumbled sideways and knocked a cart over. Instruments scattered across the floor. She screamed again, loud, raw, and visceral before her knees buckled. She slid down the wall, brushing at her neck, her arms, and her face. A doctor grabbed her shoulders and told her there was nothing on her, but she didn't hear him. She kept brushing, kept shaking, and kept screaming. Malloy turned away as the pressure behind his eyes throbbed harder. Something inside him pushed wider, a reach he could feel more than understand. A doctor by the monitors froze when their eyes met. His hands shook, and his face tightened. His breath caught, and he slapped a hand to his chest, like something had jumped under his ribs.
I'm burning. I'm burning up. Help me!
He dropped to his knees, shaking so hard his fingers scraped the floor. He backed into the wall, gasping in fast, broken spurts, while another doctor shouted that there was no fire. The man didn't hear it. He pressed himself against the wall, eyes darting around the room like he expected heat to roll toward him. Malloy stepped forward, the limbs behind him dragging across the floor, his tentacles twitching as the pulse in his skull hit again, sharp and heavy. The nurse near the exit went still. Her eyes lost focus. Her breath caught in her throat, and she pressed a hand over her mouth as tears filled her eyes.
No, please. Not again.
Her voice cracked. She shook her head once before her knees gave out. She dropped to the floor and covered her face with both hands.
Not again. Not again. Sam. My sweet dog, Sam. I'm so sorry. I wasn't here.
Her shoulders shook. Her breath was short, straining to sustain her. Malloy watched her. His own breath slowed into heavy pulls. The pressure behind his eyes eased for a moment. Then the alarm hit without warning. A sharp, piercing tone that filled the lab as red lights flashed across the ceiling. The far door slammed open. Military police rushed in fast, boots hitting the floor hard. Rifles came up in one motion, all of them aimed at him.
Freeze!
One of them shouted. Malloy turned toward the sound. The limbs behind him lifted, his tentacles twitched, and the MPs tightened their grip on their weapons.
Target is the freak!
One MP yelled.
We need backup now!
Malloy stared back.
Fire!
The rifles cracked. The sound slammed through the room. His back limb snapped forward, curling around him in a tight shield. Impacts hit the limbs with sharp metallic snaps. Sparks jumped, and the vibration ran through his body.
Keep firing! He's not going down!
Malloy stepped forward with his limbs still raised. Rounds struck and bounced away. The MPs backed up fast. Their boots scraped the floor. One of them tripped over a fallen tray and hit the ground hard.
Back up, we need backup now!
Another shouted into his radio. Malloy stared at them. The pressure behind his eyes pushed harder. A pulse rippled through his skull. The air in his throat felt solid. He locked on to the nearest MP. The man stopped moving. His rifle slipped through his hands and hit the floor, his breath desperate and animalistic. His legs stiffened. His fingers curled tight against his palms, and his eyes went wide.
I can't move!
He forced out. Malloy stepped past him. His tentacles twitched, and his back limbs scraped against the floor with a low drag. Another MP tried to lift his rifle, but as their eyes met, the man's arms dropped, and his knees dipped. His breathing became a cascade of lopsided rhythm. He stared straight ahead, unable to look away.
He's freezing them! He's freezing them in place!
Someone yelled from behind a machine. Malloy moved through the line of MPs. Their bodies stayed locked. Their eyes tracked him, wide and shaking. Their radios crackled with calls no one answered. He reached the doorway. The frame was reinforced steel, bolted deep into the concrete. His back limbs lifted high. The metal groaned under the weight. He drove the limbs into the frame. The steel bent, and the bolts snapped. Dust shook loose from above. He pulled again until finally the frame tore free from the wall with a sharp, heavy crack that echoed through the lab.
Fall back!
Someone shouted.
Fall back!
Malloy walked through the opening. His limbs twitched and then swung out. They struck the remaining supports. The ceiling above the doorway cracked. A deep rumble rolled through the floor. The MPs shouted behind him.
Move out! Get out! Go! Go!
The ceiling dropped. Concrete and steel came down in a heavy collapse. Dust blasted through the air. The doorway still behind in a wall of debris. The shouts on the other side faded under the weight of his aftermath. Malloy turned toward the stairwell. The steps rose in front of him under dim emergency lights. The alarm echoed through the corridor. He ascended the stairs. The stairwell opened into a long hallway lined with reinforced doors. The lights flickered, uneven in their dancing glimmer. His unyielding footsteps echoed down the corridor. His back limbs dragged against the wall. The double doors at the far end slid open. 4 people stood inside the room, 3 in white coats and 1 in a military uniform. Captain Haldren. His posture was stiff. His jaw was locked tight, and his eyes fixed on Malloy the second he stepped in. The others shifted behind him like they were trying to stay out of the way of something they couldn't predict. Haldren didn't blink. The door slid shut behind them. The oldest scientist whispered,
It's him, the freak.
We knew this was coming.
Haldren answered. Malloy's tentacles twitched. The limbs along his back lifted a little, pressure building behind his eyes, a pulse running through his skull. Haldren froze. His eyes widening, his hands shook at his side. Malloy felt something open inside his mind. An entry, a pool, a door swinging inward. Haldren clenched his jaw, his teeth scraping together. His breathing turned sharp and uneven.
Don't.
He forced out.
Don't you.
Malloy pushed deeper with his psychic invasion. Haldren's knees dipped and he caught himself on a desk. His fingers dug into the metal, his eyes squeezing shut. A low sound slipping out of him. Images flashed into Malloy's mind's eye. A desert facility, a cold storage vault, rows of sealed chambers, a subject breaking containment, a satellite feed of a creature tearing through a compound, a map covered in red pins, other sites, other experiments, other freaks, some stable, most not, a file stamped with one word, merge. Haldren shook hard.
Get out. Get out. Get out of my head.
One of the scientists tried to run. His hand hit the door panel, but nothing happened. Malloy turned toward him. The pressure behind his eyes pulsed again. The man grabbed his temples. His knees hit the floor. His voice cracked into a sharp, broken sound.
Stop! It hurts!
He tried to crawl. His fingers scraped the floor. His breathing turned fast and panicked. His eyes darted like he was trying to hold on to something slipping out of him. Malloy stepped closer, his tentacles writhing, his back limbs caressing the floor. The air was now suffused with the taste of fear. The third scientist backed into a desk. His papers scattered and his voice shook.
You don't understand. He wasn't the only one. There are other facilities, other subjects. We couldn't control them. We couldn't.
Malloy stared at him. The pulse hit again. The man's hands flew to his head. His breath broke apart. His voice rose into a raw, desperate sound.
No, I can't. I can't hold it.
He slid down the wall. His eyes rolled upward. His fingers curled tight against his palms. Malloy advanced, the pressure in his skull tightening. The air around him vibrated, the lights flickered, and machines along the wall spiked red. Haldren tried to speak, his voice cracking.
You don't know what you are. You don't know what they made you for.
Malloy looked straight at him. Haldren's breath stopped. His eyes widened and his mind opened like something forced apart. Malloy peered into it deeper. A classified briefing, a global threat projection, a line of text. If one stabilizes, the others will follow. A satellite image of a creature moving across a frozen landscape. A containment order labeled Site 14. A directive: terminate all unstable subjects. A final note: if the freak awakens, protocol ends. Haldren tried to fight it. His jaw clenched. His respiration came in short bursts. His hands shook uncontrollably.
Don't.
He whispered.
Don't take it.
His resistance snapped. His body went still. His eyes unfocused, and his breath slowed. His mind was now opened completely. The lights cut out, and the room dropped into darkness. Alarms echoed through the hall. Malloy released them. All four collapsed against the desks and walls. Their eyes were blank, their breathing was shallow, and their hands were limp. They blinked slowly, confused, like they'd lost track of where they were. Haldren looked up at him, dazed.
Who are you?
Malloy turned toward the door, his back limbs lifting. The panel sparked when he touched it, and the door slid open. A hallway stretched ahead of him. Gunfire shook the walls in distant bursts. The pulse of the alarms flashed, rattling the vents. A voice echoed from ahead.
Contact! Contact! The freak is in the north wing!
Boots thundered, rifles cracked. Malloy turned toward the sound. His tentacle twitched in fast, uneven movements. Pressure built behind his eyes in a sharp, rising rhythm. The MPs rounded the corner.
Open fire!
Rifles cracked. The sound slammed through the hallway. His back limbs snapped forward, forming a tight shield. Rounds struck the limbs with sharp, metallic snaps.
Keep firing! Don't let him through!
Malloy stepped forward. His limbs stayed raised. Bullets hit and bounced away. The MPs backed up, their boots scraping the floor. One stumbled into a wall and dropped his rifle. The pulse in Malloy's skull surged. The MP froze, his breath catching and his eyes widening. His hands shook and his chest tightened in a hard, involuntary spasm. His knees dipped and he fell behind the others.
Man down! Man down!
Another MP tried to flank him. Malloy turned his head. The pulse emitted again. The man's breath caught hard, and his rifle slipped from his hands. His legs locked, and his voice cracked into a sharp, panicked sound.
I can't move!
Radios crackled.
He's in the main corridor! He's not stopping! We need backup now!
Malloy's back limbs lifted high. One limb swung outward. It hit an MP square in the chest. The man flew out of view and hit something hard down the hall. His rifle clattered across the floor. Another limb struck a wall panel, causing sparks to burst and the lights to flicker. The hallway dropped into a dim red, emergency glow. Malloy moved faster. His breath deepened as adrenaline coursed through him. The cold air burned his throat, and his appendages twitched in erratic, cruel movements. An MP stepped out from a side door with a shotgun.
Freeze! Freeze right now!
Malloy stared at him, and the man's eyes widened. His breath completely broke, and his hands shook. His voice dropped into a raw whisper.
Get out of my head!
He backed into the doorway and disappeared. Malloy kept moving. The hallway opened into a wide loading bay. Snow blew in through a cracked service door. The Alaskan wind cut through the room in unyielding gales. MPs had formed a line behind overturned crates and metal carts.
Hold the line! Don't let the freak reach the exit! Fire on my mark!
Malloy stepped into the open.
Fire!
Gunfire tore through the bay. Bullets ripped into crates. Sparks jumped from metal carts. His limbs snapped into a shield again, and the impacts rang through the room. He advanced. One limb struck forward. It hit a stack of crates, and they toppled and crashed down onto the MP's position. Shouts erupted, boots scrambled, and radios filled with frantic voices.
He's breaking through!
Malloy stared at the nearest MP. The pulse hit harder than before. The man's breath stopped. His eyes rolled upward. He dropped behind the barricade and didn't get back up. The others panicked.
Retreat! Get out of the bay! Move!
Malloy walked through the chaos. His limbs tore through crates, carts, and metal supports. The floor shook. Cold wind blasted through the broken door. Snow swirled around him. The heat of his exhales obscured the air with fog. At last, he reached the exit. An MP tried to block him, but a limb hit the ground beside the man. The shockwave knocked him off his feet and out of sight. Malloy stepped into the snow. The cold hit him hard. The wind roared across the open yard. Floodlights flickered, and sirens wailed from the towers. The Alaskan night stretched out in front of him, dark and empty. Behind him, MP shouted from inside the bay. Malloy turned, his back limbs lifted high. He drove them into the loading bay support beams. The metal bent, and the concrete cracked. Snow and dust blasted into the air. The roof sagged, and the walls buckled. The MP's shouts turned frantic. The roof collapsed inward. The sound carried across the yard. The shouts were silenced under the weight of the collapse. Malloy stood in the snow. The wind pushed against him, its cold biting into his skin. His breathing slowed, and his limbs lowered under their own weight. He turned toward the dark stretch of tundra. Snow was hitting the yard in blistering squalls. The force of the wind was strong enough to cause his new limbs to sway. He moved forward in sinking steps, his limbs dragging behind him, leaving deep grooves in the snow. A spotlight snapped on, and voices shouted from the catwalks. Rifles crackled, boots slammed against metal. Malloy stared at the snow ahead of him. The surface shifted. A long crack opened. Snow slid aside as something pushed upward. A dark shape rose from beneath the surface, breaking through with a heavy burst of powder. A creature had pulled itself out of the ground. It was larger than Malloy. Its limbs were longer. Its back carried thick, jointed appendages that twitched in slow, deliberate movements. Its skin was pale, and stretched tight across its frame. Its mouth hung open, but its breath did not fog the air. Malloy stared at it, and the creature stared back. A pulse assailed Malloy's skull, not from him, from it. His vision blurred, and his knees dipped. His breath stuttered in his chest. The creature stepped closer, snow crunching under its weight. Rounds struck the creature's limbs, and sparks jumped. Yet the creature's response was stoic. It kept moving toward Malloy, its eyes locked onto him. Another pulse invaded him. His jaw clenched, and his tentacles twitched in sharp, involuntary movements. The creature stopped a few feet away. Malloy felt something push into his mind. Not a memory, or a thought, but a presence. Heavy, cold, and familiar in a way he couldn't place. His vision doubled, then snapped back. The creature leaned closer. A low sound came from its throat, a vibration that jolted Malloy's chest. Another pulse hit him. Images flashed behind his eyes. A frozen landscape, a facility buried under ice. Rows of containment pods, and subjects inside them, some still, some moving. A file stamped, Site 14. A directive, merge. Malloy staggered, and his limbs shook. The cold crawled up his spine. The creature stepped even closer. Its breath carried no heat, and its eyes didn't blink. Malloy felt the pressure behind his eyes rise again, not from fear, not from pain, but from something pushing outward. His tentacles twitched, and his limbs lifted a few inches off the snow. The creature's limbs lifted in the same motion. Malloy's breath caught. The creature leaned in until its face was inches from his. Its tentacles brushed the air of his cheek. Another pulse struck him, stronger than the others. His vision went white for a second, and his chest tightened, his limbs jerking. The creature stepped back. Malloy felt something inside him shift. Not physically, but deeper. A connection, a recognition he didn't understand. The creature turned toward the fence. The MPs continued to shout. Their rifles cracked, and their bullets bombarded the creature's limbs, but bounced away. The creature displayed no reaction as it continued to walk toward the fence with slow, heavy steps. Malloy followed, but from a healthy distance. The creature reached the fence, and its limbs lifted. It bent the metal and snapped the bolts. The fence tore open with a sharp, heavy crack, and snow blew through the gap. The creature stepped through. Malloy took a step after it. The creature continued on into the dark stretch of tundra. Malloy reluctantly followed behind. The wind swallowed the sound of the facility behind them. Floodlights faded, sirens dimmed, and the snow covered their tracks as fast as they made them. The creature was driven to continue forward, undeterred by the harsh natural elements. The cold dug deep into Malloy's skin. And then the creature stopped. Malloy stopped as well. The creature looked at him, and another psychic invasion invaded Malloy. He saw a frozen corridor, another row of containment pods, and a subject inside them. A label, Substrate 01. A second label, Substrate 02. A third, Substrate 03. And a final line of text, Merge Protocol, active. Malloy staggered. The cold crawled up his spine. not from the physical elements, but from the fear he was feeling. The creature nodded before turning away and continuing on into the harsh landscape. Malloy exhaled and followed behind. And the two shapes, one steady, one struggling, moved deeper into the frozen night. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's story. I want to thank the Void Echoes, who voiced Haldren, Spooky Patrick, who voiced Malloy, Dreadful Anecdotes, and Dark Veil Tales, who voiced the scientists, and Morgan Goodman, who voiced the nurse and made our intro music. Also, Phil Zio, who voiced the doctor, and composed the main music track and the outro. I also want to thank all my patrons, and especially my first, Shadowthread Stories, who wrote tonight's story. I've been working overtime a lot at my day job lately, so it has been a struggle getting videos out, but I do have quite a few big collabs on the way. I also just finished recording the footage for the Q&A video earlier today, so as soon as the camera woman that I hired finishes editing that, I'm going to upload it. I also want to thank everyone who has been submitting stories lately. You may notice that the hype button is now finally visible on this video. If you enjoyed this but can't help support financially via the new memberships or Patreon, that is completely okay. Liking, commenting, sharing, and hyping are all a huge help, and even just telling your friends that Dubach The Keeper does narrations with no AI is a massive help. After this video ends, make sure to check out the other channels that I worked with, and when you do, let them know that Dubach The Keeper sent you.